All right. Well, thanks for joining us, everyone. My name is Jasper with Score Main, and I'm joined by Dan Reed of Dan Reed Marketing for today's presentation on market research for marketing and finding your best customer. I do want to thank today's sponsor, the Maine Technology Institute, for making today's workshop happen. If you're not familiar with SCORE, we are a partner of the Small Business Administration, where we help businesses and clients from all stages of the business cycle, from pre-start to exit. We look forward to your questions as they arise. If you have anything you're coming into today with, feel free to cue it in the chat, or as they come up, throw it in the chat, or utilize the raise hand function at the end during the Q&A section, if that's what you'd like, Dan.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jasper. And as Jasper had mentioned, thank you everyone for being here. Feel free to unmute yourself to ask questions as the workshop goes along, or put something in the chat. I'm happy to address things as we go along. All right. So thank you for joining me. Today, we are going to be covering market research, finding your best customers, or market research for your marketing, and how we can utilize the principles of market research, the things that you may have done when you were putting your business plan together, and then take those things to the next level, and like, how do we actually start implementing those concepts? So just to kind of go over what we're looking at here in the goals for today, what we're going to be doing is talking about the basics of market research for marketing, kind of like the basics of what to look for when you're thinking about your customer. We'll talk a little bit about what an ideal customer is, and developing an ideal customer profile. And this is just kind of a way to categorize or bucket your customers, good or bad, so that you have a better understanding of how you can utilize those buckets and how you can utilize common denominators between your customers to make your marketing more efficient. And a big way that we're going to do that today is we're going to talk about demographics and psychographics. And those are just two different ways of kind of categorizing concepts about a person or a group of people so that you can more easily understand them. And finally, we'll kind of bring that home to, all right, so we've done all this research, so what are we going to do with it? And we'll talk a little bit about different advertising options and the ones that might fit your needs with the research that we've done on psychographics, demographics, and market research in general. So what is marketing anyway, really, right? When we're talking about the basics of marketing and how to communicate with folks, we're really talking about how to reach audiences. And your customers are definitely a part of that, but your audience kind of goes beyond just your customers. It goes to everyone who really interacts with you or who might hear or interact with your business. And I would really kind of think about those audiences in a couple of different ways. I wouldn't really think about everyone all in one pot or all of your customers as one kind of person. The way that I would recommend thinking about it is kind of more of a layered approach. So you have the folks who are really diehard supporters of a business. A way to think about this is, there are folks out there who will always buy the next new Apple product. Those folks are like evangelists for Apple. They're happy to use anything that they put out there. They'll generate marketing content just by posting and putting information out there and posts out there about Apple products, and they build that hype. They might participate in product launches and things of that nature, where they'd have to stand in line just to get a product from Apple. And that's a really good example of that diehard customer, or someone who's going to be a lifer for your business. And then the next layer down from that, I would really think about who's in your orbit. Who are folks who've purchased from you before, but they're not going to come to every event or buy every product that you put out there. They might not necessarily participate in everything, but they participate enough to where you're familiar with them, or you can count on them being regular customers. And then we have another tier below that. We have people who are out of your orbit. And people who are out of your orbit, really what we're talking about are folks who've either never heard of you before, or maybe they've heard of you a few times, or maybe they bought one or two things from you. But, there's not a huge expectation that they're going to convert into a long-term customer. Or, maybe there's someone who's from out of town, and you don't know if they're ever going to vacation in Maine again. And each one of those is a different kind of audience. And every audience is going to respond differently to how you're marketing to them. For an example of what this really looks like is people who are really diehard loyalists or evangelists for your brand. If you have any inside jokes, they're probably going to know what those are, and they're probably going to respond to them. But people who are out of your orbit would go over their head, and that's totally fine. That's really just about knowing how to communicate with your audience and who you're talking to when you're making different marketing pieces. And this really comes down to knowing your business. How do you know your business well enough to know who these different audience segments are? Is your business someone who sells to another business, or are you more selling to customers of the general public? That would be B2B or B2C. And do you sell a product or do you sell a service, or maybe it's more in line with an experience? And what are other businesses that are similar to what you do, or other businesses who your customers might purchase from? What are those businesses, and how do they relate back to your business? Are they in the same industry, or are they in a related industry or related field? Or is it just one of those things where, maybe it just makes more sense when you look at your ideal customer profile, but it doesn't make sense up front? An example of what that looks like is, maybe every time someone comes into your business, more often than not, they have an iced coffee in their hand. Maybe that's something to pay attention to and something to note down. And another key factor is, how do your customers see your business? It's really easy to kind of get trapped in how you see your business, but that's probably one of the least important factors of marketing. It's much, much more important to understand and to appeal to how your customers see your business, and trying to figure out how you can get into that headspace. That really comes down to knowing your customer. Do you know your customer well enough to know how they see your business? Who is your best customer, and where do they spend their time? And when are they in the right mindset to make a purchase from you? Is it one of those things where they're always going to be excited to hear about you, or do they only really want to hear about you because you're a restaurant and it's around dinner time and they haven't put anything together yet today? And another thing to consider is, how much contact is too much. I know I've certainly unsubscribed from email lists before because I feel like I'm just getting inundated with email after email from someone. And that's a pretty common experience. So you'll want to kind of manage how much you're putting out there. And we see this on social media too, where Facebook will start to deprioritize you if you're posting too often. So you're probably thinking, all right, Dan, this is a lot of great information and everything, but how does this actually come together, right? So we'll go through an example here today, and we'll talk about a example of a Biddeford yoga studio. And they're looking to open in Biddeford. They want to offer yoga classes in an exercise space, kind of like a community space. And they want to create that community space for people who are interested in healthy living. So we'll go over that information we learned from the last few slides and see if we can put something together. All right, so let's see if we know our business. What are we providing to the community? What are we selling here? And in this instance, I would say it's more the service of yoga classes and the experience of a community space. You're kind of selling more than you can sell more than one thing, and sometimes things wrap from one to another, and that's okay. It's really about knowing how people are experiencing it. And in this instance, we'll say this is more of a business to customer style, or business to customer style yoga studio. It's definitely possible to do a yoga studio that's more like a retreat, where it's business to business and you're bringing in folks who are doing maybe team building exercises. But we'll say for this instance, we're going to kind of focus on the general public and creating a community space. What are some of the effective things that other businesses who are in our field do? Well, most other yoga studios not only have a website, but their primary mode of marketing tends to be social media. It's one of those things where you can take photos and it always looks pretty good when you have a group of people who are all on the same page doing the same task. And whom do I know who would make a good ideal customer in my life? And in this instance, I will say my friend Abby would make a great customer for my yoga studio. So let's get to know Abby a little bit better. So how do we know our customer, right? And that really can kind of be split down into many different ways. But what we're going to focus on here today is knowing your customer through a combination of demographics and psychographics. And a demographic is really kind of those like immutable characteristics about someone, age, location, what they do for work, kind of those things that don't tend to, they tend to be what you would call hard characteristics. And then you have your soft characteristics, which are things like your aspirations. What are your goals? What are you motivated by? What are things that frustrate you? And those kind of fall into the bucket of psychographics. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and talk to our friend Abby. We'll get a range of these different pieces of information. We'll put them all down and we'll try to get an idea of the full picture. And one of the best ways to do that is an ideal customer profile. So this is an example of what that could look like. And this is a template, and that template will be sent out after the workshop along with the slides today. So don't worry about missing this. And this ideal customer profile is really meant to kind of give a single page snapshot of what our business's customer really looks like. And it's a great way to find answers related to your business, especially when you're doing marketing. It's really good to understand why customers make buying decisions. This is a key concept. And an ideal customer profile can really be as complex or as simple as you need it to be. You can see in this example, we've kind of outlined who Abby is. She listens to the radio a lot. She rents her living space. She's really into healthy living. She's a barista in Portland and lives in Biddeford. And she likes to exercise and make new friends. And that's really helpful information for how we decide to market to folks who we think are good fits for our business. Let's say you need something that's a little more in-depth. While this still being a one-pager, there's also this template as well, which will be sent out as well, that kind of goes into more depth about the different aspects of psychographics and demographics. As you can see, this one's laid out where your demographics are more on your left, and the psychographics are more on the right. And it just makes it a little easier to kind of get an understanding of who your ideal customer might look like. So how does this actually function, right? So how do we take this and do something with it? We'll have some more examples of how to do that later, but this is more like the high level of, all right, so I filled this out, and what does that all mean, right? So when you're talking about marketing, especially as it relates to your different kinds of audiences and your different kinds of customers, the more qualities that someone has in your ideal customer profile, especially if it's accurate, they have a much higher chance of moving up that audience list. If someone's a really good fit for your business and they've never heard of you before, there's a much higher chance for them to go from that out of orbit to in your orbit, or in your orbit to that like evangelist level thinking or relationship with your business. They're much more likely to engage with you on social media and on email and other platforms. And they're much more, and as I mentioned, much more likely to move up that audience list. And if someone has less of those qualities that kind of relate to your ideal customer profile, there's a higher chance of them staying out of your orbit or moving down that list. You could have someone who maybe they were more engaged in the past because they were at a different stage of life. And now that they've matured a little bit, or maybe they've had significant life events, that's moved them down the list and deprioritized your business for them. And that's just something to keep in mind as everyone changes and people change in general. It's also possible for your ideal customers and your ideal customer profiles to change, especially as your services might pivot over time. What this all really matters for is how you speak to your audience. So when you're marketing, and I mentioned this a little bit earlier, when you're marketing, you always want to be aware of all of your audiences at all times. And again, as I mentioned earlier, evangelists understand your inside jokes, and people who are outside of your orbit won't, and that's okay. What's really key is just knowing when that's happening, being aware if hey, maybe you're putting too much emphasis on nurturing those relationships with folks who are higher up the list, and you really need to get people in your pipeline more. So marketing so that people who are out of your orbit have a much more likely of a chance to engage and get involved. That's a good thing to know and a good thing to be able to identify within your business. It's also good to encourage people to move up your audience list, and there are different ways to do that, right? So joining your mailing list, that's another touch point, and that might be a way for people to get more involved in your business. Or encouraging them to like your social media page so that they see future posts. And another thing to consider here is when you're speaking to your audience, and this is especially true when it comes to online reviews, respond to online reviews as if you're responding to everyone, not the person who left the review. Because the value of a review response is really not that individual who posted something, probably when they were angry about your business, especially if it's negative. It's more about all the people who see that after the fact and how they respond and how they think about your business based on your response. I can already hear it now. All right, Dan, this is great and everything, but what platforms do I use? How do I actually make this work? And I understand what platforms are best. Can you envision your ideal customer on that platform? That's a really good place to start. And when you think about that, and when you think about your ideal customer on that platform, how do they engage with it? Are they doing it at work? Are they doing it in the car? Are they at home? Is this something that they do on vacation, or is this something they only do when they're in their house, or is this something they do while they're doom scrolling on their phone at midnight? Can you envision your brand on this platform? I think everyone has the perception that it would be amazing to see their business on television or a TV commercial for them, but is that something that actually makes sense for your business? And this kind of comes back to finding folks who are good fits for your ideal customer profile in the first place. But if you feel like someone might be a good fit in your personal life, you don't have to sell them. You can just ask them to kind of talk a little bit about hey, do you listen to the radio, or do you watch a lot of TV, or, are you on LinkedIn? Is that somewhere where you spend time? You don't have to ask them to buy your product or your service, or to buy something for your business in order to get some real value out of folks who you think fit your ideal customer profile. This process is a lot more about understanding than it is anything. And all right, so we have all this data. We've talked to folks. What do we do with it, right? Your ideal customer profile really helps you inform your ideal platforms. We talked a little bit about this in the last slide, but things like, what kind of website makes sense? Does it make sense to have a large website with a lot of information on it? Or will a website where it's more like a digital business card really work for you? What social media platforms, if any, do you think are a good fit? Do you think printing something in the newspaper would be helpful? Maine is still a pretty an older state, so there is a large presence for both print and radio. Is that something that makes sense based on your ideal customer profile? Does text message marketing work for you, or flyers, direct mail? Should you be putting on events? These are all different touch points and different ways to kind of communicate and interact with customers. And not every platform is going to be good for every business. In fact, I would say most businesses only really will see significant success on a few platforms, especially in the beginning. And really identifying where that is and how to connect with those folks is critical. We also have things like organic platforms versus paid platforms. And this really kind of comes down to a cost factor. Organic platforms tend to be free or low cost. They do tend to require more of your time, and that's really the trade-off there. And you really need to have a deep understanding of how to connect with your ideal customer profile when you're doing an organic platform. And what that really could be is something like posting on social media on a regular basis. That's an organic platform. And then on the other side, you have things like paid platforms. This is instant reach to people who are outside of your orbit. So people who don't already know about your business, or who aren't on that, that higher tier list where you're already regularly marketing to them. Paid platforms tend to give you an instant reach to those folks. And a strong customer profile usually directly helps with targeting, but it's not necessary for making the connection. It's usually much faster as well. You're talking about a dollar spend for a short turnaround time. And a good marketing strategy will use both of these things. An example of what a paid platform might look like to kind of counter posting on Facebook, you could also run an ad on Facebook, and that ad will run for a set amount of time. Sometimes it's indefinite, but usually it's for a couple of weeks. And in those couple of weeks, you can get a good idea of who interacted with that ad and what actions they took, if they made any sales, or whatever your call to action is. So it gives you a kind of a deeper insight really quickly, but it has that dollar amount attached to it. So let's kind of cover back or hop back to our example. We have our yoga studio. So if you're with us right now, please feel free to put into the chat which one of these two social media platforms that you think would be a better fit for our yoga studio, just kind of based on what we've talked about already and kind of implementing some of those methods that we've already kind of covered. Yeah, we have someone in the chat here who Avril, who said Instagram, and I got to be honest, I completely agree with you. As we talked about before, it's totally possible to do more of a B2B style retreat yoga center, but we're really going for that community space. So while LinkedIn might work for that corporate retreat yoga center, for our community space, Instagram makes a lot more sense, especially with the audience that we're trying to cultivate. And that's a good example of how you can just think about the options that you have available, think about the folks who are on those platforms, think about your ideal customer, and see what you can match up. Another really good example of how you can utilize this kind of market research in order to take the next steps in marketing your business is in co-marketing. Co-marketing is when two businesses collaborate on a goal. You already have an audience, and this other business or organization already has an audience, and the goal is to not only do whatever it is that you're doing as an event or as a engagement, but also to market to each other's already existing curated audiences. And you're really providing credibility through that collaboration. These tend to be low cost or free, but it really depends on the kind of collaboration that you're looking to do with the other business. And what you really want to do with this is co-market with your ideal customer in mind so that you can better build your orbit. And we'll give a few examples on what co-marketing looks like and how businesses local to Maine, specifically in Biddeford, have utilized co-marketing to be successful. Here we have two examples, Yego Coffee of Boston and Time and Tide of Biddeford. While they're both in the same industry, they have extreme customer crossover in their ideal customer base because they're both small batch coffee roasters that are focused on high quality coffee and sustainable coffee. And they hosted a discussion on coffee sourcing and supply lines in the industry together in a way where folks who, Yego's in Boston, so folks down there have probably never had Time and Tide before, but now they can order it online and give it a go and try it. And Time and Tide was afforded that credibility through this collaboration with Yego. And the same is true in reverse. And another example of what this looks like, a little closer to home with our yoga studio example, Lucky Pigeon Brewing hosted yoga instructor Emily Lane on Sundays for yoga inside of their gluten-free brewery. And this really cross-promoted between two audiences that are historically considered health conscious. So folks who are in celiac or who have gluten intolerance are very health conscious about where they're spending their time and money as it relates to their intolerance. And folks who are engaging in yoga or who are seeking out yoga tend to be folks who are also on a very similar health conscious track. And that allowed for crossover where the yoga class would end at the time the brewery was opening. So it gave them an excuse to get all these folks who meet their ideal customer profile in the space as they're opening. And another great example of how you can utilize your ideal customer profile is directly in social media. This is something you could take from this workshop today, right after this here, fill out an ideal customer profile and take it to Facebook and do an ad today that will provide you with some results that you're looking for, or at least help provide those results you're looking for. On many social media platforms, this is an example of what Meta looks like, which is Facebook and Instagram. You can directly enter demographic and psychographic information and data into your audience details. And this is great for running ads or boosting posts. You can see here things that I've marked in blue are demographic information that we pulled directly from the ideal customer profile we created with our friend Abby for our yoga studio example. And those psychographic concepts are listed in red. And these are things that you can do to directly see results and more tightly focus your marketing so that every dollar that you spend on this marketing effort is only being shown to people who are much more likely to purchase from you than the general public at large. There are a lot of other ways that you can use your ideal customer profile as well. Traditional media platforms are a great example. TV, radio, and newspaper all have viewer profiles or listener profiles where they outline the kind of person who they think is viewing that particular station or program at any one point in time. And you can provide your ideal customer profile to your agent or underwriter at these traditional media platforms, and they will be able to make good suggestions on what shows or what times you should want to run your ad based on their existing viewer profiles. This is also one of those areas where you'll have to decide if you want to create your own media or have them create it. Typically, when you're purchasing ad space with a newspaper or with print in general, or as a TV or radio ad, they will offer to make the ad included in the price of the advertising. And that's something you'll have to decide if you want to do that, or if you feel like you have enough creative direction to do it yourself or hire someone to do that. And we wrapped up pretty quick today. I'm still happy to stay on and answer any questions that folks may have, but I did want to say thank you so much for attending today. You'll be getting an evaluation survey after this. When you receive that email, please fill out that survey. It gives us some great ideas on how we can improve workshops in the future. And if you'd like to schedule an appointment with a mentor, which is absolutely free, please feel free to go to score.org/find-mentor.
Yeah, there'll also be a link to that in the follow-up email, as well as a link to the recording of today if you missed anything or joined us late. And that'll be on our YouTube channel. That also is a repository for all of our recorded workshops. For more topics like this, or if you're looking for any examples of cash flow or possibly funding as well, we have workshops on those. I do want to thank everyone for attending as well. I want to thank Dan for a great presentation. If anyone has any questions, now's a great time to throw them in the chat or come off of mute. Well, in any case, if there isn't, we can wrap up, and do want to thank everyone again one more time for attending. And if you don't, or if you aren't already working with a mentor, as Dan said, it is completely free and confidential, and you just do so at score.org/find mentor. Thanks again to our sponsor of today's workshop, the Maine Technology Institute, and thanks, Dan, one more time for another great presentation.
Thank you so much, Jasper. Have a good day, everyone.
Hope everyone has a great rest of your day.